The soft hum of conversation fills the cafe as I sit down, watching my granddaughter, Olivia, and her friends laugh, ignoring me. Still, I smile politely, my hands folding in my lap as she gestures me to a corner table. As her friends giggle, dismissing me like some relic of the past, the smell of freshly brewed coffee fills the air. While the sting of her words lingers, something shifts inside me. The same cafe she chose to belittle me will now reflect my power. That's when I stand, her laughter still echoing in my ears, and I walk to claim what's mine. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The cafe was quiet for a Thursday afternoon, the hum of whispered conversations mixing with the faint clink of silverware. Eleanor Brooks stepped into the familiar warmth of her favorite cafe, the one she'd visited for years, where every corner knew her face. It was her escape, a place where she could breathe, take refuge, and forget the demands of the world if only for a moment. But today was different. Today, she wasn't just Eleanor, the woman who'd built her own empire. Today, she was a grandmother, a role that should have been filled with pride, but now it felt like a burden. Her granddaughter Olivia had invited her to lunch, a rare gesture that Eleanor usually cherished. She hadn't seen much of Olivia lately, with the girl's busy life of college, social engagements, and fashionable pursuits. Eleanor had been looking forward to this meeting, expecting a pleasant afternoon catching up. As she approached the table, Olivia didn't immediately look up. Her eyes were glued to her phone, fingers tapping away, likely coordinating with her friends. When she finally noticed Eleanor standing at the table, a flicker of surprise crossed Olivia's face before quickly turning into a strained smile. "Grandma," Olivia began, a bit too casually. "I think it would be better if you sat over there," she said, gesturing toward a smaller, less prominent table by the window. Eleanor paused, blinking as if she hadn't heard correctly. A small, polite smile tugged at her lips. She noticed the way Olivia's friends, beautiful, fashionable young women who Eleanor had always tried to be gracious toward, looked away, avoiding eye contact, some shifting in their seats uncomfortably. Olivia, on the other hand, looked almost relieved that the problem of seating had been solved. "Why don't you join us, Grandma?" Olivia continued, her tone too light to mask the thinly veiled discomfort. "My friends, they just prefer it when, well, you know, when it's just us." Eleanor felt a tightness in her chest. The words stung, sharper than any sharp-dressed critique she had ever received. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to breathe evenly. "Of course, darling," Eleanor said smoothly, her voice unwavering, as if the words hadn't pierced deep into her core. She took a step back, a quiet nod before she made her way to the table Olivia had pointed out. Sitting down, Eleanor folded her hands, her fingers trembling only slightly as she forced a calm demeanor. The cafe was bustling with energy, but her focus narrowed to the sight of Olivia and her friends, chatting and laughing across the room. They hadn't even spared a second glance back at her. Olivia's laughter rang out, the sound so light, so carefree, so hollow. Eleanor's gaze remained fixed on her granddaughter, though her thoughts were far away. How could Olivia, her own flesh and blood, treat her with such dismissive cruelty? It was as though everything Eleanor had worked for, all the success she'd built, counted for nothing in Olivia's world. To Olivia and her friends, she was just an older woman, someone who didn't fit into their narrow, image-obsessed circle. As she watched them, a quiet rage simmered in her chest, but Eleanor contained it. She wasn't the kind of woman to lash out impulsively. No, she was better than that. She'd learned long ago how to wield her power quietly, with subtlety, with grace. But today, something inside her shifted. A lesson would be taught, and it would be on her terms. Later, as the meeting came to an end, Eleanor lingered a little longer, waiting for Olivia's goodbye. The young woman, with all her pretty, shallow charm, texted her almost immediately. "Grandma, you weren't really my kind of company today, but maybe we can try again another time." The words felt like an afterthought, cold and dismissive, as though Olivia had already moved on to the next thing in her world. Eleanor stared at the screen for a moment, feeling the sharpness of the wound still fresh. She should have been used to it by now. But today was different. Today, Eleanor felt the weight of every unspoken word, every misjudgment, and it stirred something within her. She set her phone down, turning to the side where her friends Sophia and Charlotte were seated nearby. They'd watched the whole scene unfold, their eyes filled with concern. "Sophia, Charlotte," Eleanor said, her voice quiet but firm. "What would you advise me to do?" Sophia, ever the voice of reason, pursed her lips, her brows furrowing with sympathy. "Let it go, Eleanor. She's young. She doesn't know what she's saying." Charlotte nodded. "Don't let it get to you. She'll come around eventually." But Eleanor wasn't listening. Her gaze remained steely, unfocused. The words hadn't cut just once. They had opened up a wound that she hadn't realized had been festering for years. It wasn't just about the cafe or the table or the dismissal. It was about the way Olivia had dismissed everything Eleanor had built. It was about Olivia believing that class, grace, and dignity were things that could only be bought. Things that belonged to the young and beautiful. Eleanor's lips tightened into a smile. "No, I think this is something I need to handle differently. Olivia needs to learn what class really is, and I'm going to show her." Her friends exchanged wary glances, but Eleanor didn't wait for their approval. She had made up her mind. It was time to remind Olivia that some things, like success and dignity, couldn't be discarded so easily. As she walked out of the cafe, her mind was already spinning with possibilities. There was something she could do, something big. And she would do it with the kind of elegance only she could pull off. A lesson was about to be taught, and Olivia wouldn't forget it. Eleanor didn't waste a moment. The drive home was silent, the soft hum of the car's engine the only sound, but her mind was a whirlwind. Olivia's words, her dismissive tone, her entire lack of awareness, they reverberated through her thoughts, louder and louder, demanding something be done. She needed to act, but not in the way Olivia would expect. Not in anger. No, Eleanor was better than that. It wasn't revenge she sought. It was a lesson. And it would be taught with the kind of quiet precision only someone who had built an empire could understand. By the time she arrived home, her plan was taking shape, each piece falling neatly into place. She sat at her desk, hands trembling slightly as she picked up the phone. It was the cafe. Her cafe now. Not in the way most people owned businesses, but in a way that allowed her to remain unseen, influencing from the shadows. She dialed the number. "Jake, it's Eleanor," she said, with the same smoothness that had made her a business mogul. "I need a table, the best one you've got, the one where everyone will see." Jake, the cafe's owner, paused for a second. "For when?" "Tomorrow, 12:30 p.m. I'll be there with a friend, but I want it to be special. Make sure your staff knows I'm coming." The connection between them was more than just business. It was a respect earned over years of quiet but decisive moves. Jake didn't question her. He knew better. After she hung up, Eleanor walked to her closet, her mind still churning. She needed something that would send a message, a bold statement. She wasn't interested in the fleeting trends Olivia and her friends chased. No, Eleanor wanted to exude something timeless. She smiled to herself, the first flicker of satisfaction crossing her face. Sophia would help her, of course. Sophia, the woman who had always been a steady force in Eleanor's life, knew exactly what her friend needed to wear for this new venture. They were a team, after all. The next morning, the two of them went shopping. Eleanor was decisive, as always. She picked out a sleek, fitted dress, modern, but with a touch of classic elegance that made it unmistakably her. The rich emerald color would stand out in the cafe's neutral tones. It was a statement of confidence, of a woman who had never been afraid to stand out. Sophia raised an eyebrow when she saw the dress. Eleanor, this is quite the choice. Eleanor chuckled. It's not just about wearing something beautiful, Sophia. It's about owning the room. Sophia shook her head, smiling at the sheer confidence Eleanor had in herself. You're something else. You know that? Eleanor grinned. Just wait until Olivia sees it. They spent hours in boutiques, finding the right accessories. By the time they were done, Eleanor was almost giddy, the thought of Olivia's stunned face making her heart race with anticipation. As they walked back to the car, Eleanor's phone buzzed. She glanced down, seeing Olivia's name flashing on the screen. It was a simple message. You're still invited, you know. Eleanor's lips curled into a smile, but her response was anything but eager. Thank you, but I have other plans. The thrill of it made her feel alive. It wasn't just about the invitation. It was about what she was going to do. Olivia thought her world was so carefully curated, so polished. Eleanor would show her how fleeting that could be when you didn't understand the deeper currents beneath the surface. By noon the next day, Eleanor stood outside the cafe, feeling a rush of excitement surge through her. She was in control now. She would walk in as though it were her own space. Because in a way, it would be. She wasn't just walking into the place she frequented, she was walking into a new chapter of her life, a chapter Olivia could never imagine. When she entered the cafe, she could see the staff immediately shifting, their eyes darting over to her. Jake was already there, waiting by the front with a knowing look. He greeted her with warmth, but there was a subtle shift in the air as he led her to the table at the front. The best table. The one that commanded attention. She was ready. As she settled into the chair, a quiet satisfaction washed over her. This was it. The lesson was about to begin. She wasn't just another diner in a cafe. She was the guest of honor. And as the door opened, Eleanor's gaze lifted, knowing exactly when Olivia would walk through the door. It was only a matter of time. Her phone buzzed again. Olivia's name. I didn't realize you were so busy. Maybe another time? Eleanor read the message and then smiled to herself, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Olivia had no idea what she was about to face. The door swung open. Eleanor's heart beat faster. Olivia had arrived. But this time, Eleanor wasn't the one left out. She was the one who would leave an impression. One that Olivia would never forget. Eleanor walked into the cafe with Sophia by her side, both women exuding an air of quiet confidence that made the world around them seem to shift. The faint clink of cups and the murmur of hushed conversations seemed to fade as the two of them made their entrance. They weren't just walking into a cafe, they were walking into the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter that Olivia, and everyone else who had ever doubted Eleanor, wouldn't see coming. Jake, the cafe owner, was standing near the counter, his usual friendly smile faltering as he caught sight of her. His surprise was palpable. He hadn't seen Eleanor in a while, and certainly not like this. Dressed in that stunning emerald dress, hair perfectly styled, a commanding presence that seemed to fill the room even before she spoke. "Eleanor!" Jake exclaimed, his voice a mix of shock and delight. "What a surprise to see you here today. I wasn't expecting you." Eleanor smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips. "I know, Jake. But today, I'm here for a different reason. I've made an investment. A permanent one." Jake's eyes widened, his brows furrowing slightly in confusion. "An investment? What are you—" Before he could finish, Eleanor cut him off, her tone light but firm. "I've bought a stake in this cafe, Jake. Enough to be involved, but not enough to overshadow the incredible work you've done. I'll be here. Often. And I have some ideas about the direction this place is going." Jake stood still for a moment, his eyes searching Eleanor's face for some sign of a joke, but there was none. You bought in?" he asked, his voice low with disbelief. "Just a small share," Eleanor said, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "But enough to make a difference. You've got potential here, Jake, and I'm going to help you tap into it." Jake looked at her, his expression shifting from surprise to admiration. "Well, I'm not going to argue with that. Welcome aboard, Eleanor." He extended his hand, and Eleanor shook it firmly, a clear signal that she was here to stay. Sophia, who had been silently observing the exchange, leaned in and whispered, "You're really doing it, aren't you?" Eleanor's smile was thin, calculating. "Why not? It's time I take a little more control over the narrative. Let's see how Olivia likes the new direction." Just as she spoke, the door swung open, and Eleanor's sharp gaze flicked toward the entrance. Olivia and her friends stepped inside, their voices filled with chatter, unaware of the storm that was about to hit them. Olivia's laughter echoed, her head held high as she scanned the room for a place to sit, her friends in tow. All of them wrapped in the kind of superficial beauty Eleanor had learned to despise. But as they walked further into the cafe, Olivia's eyes locked on her grandmother. A flicker of confusion crossed her face as she noticed Eleanor sitting at the prime table, the one that had always been reserved for the highest-profile guests, the one that commanded the most attention. And there she was, Eleanor, poised and regal, sitting with Sophia and chatting with Jake like she owned the place. For a split second, Olivia froze, her confident stride faltering as the reality of the situation set in. Eleanor, her grandmother, the one she had humiliated, was sitting in the heart of the cafe, not as an afterthought, but as a presence. Olivia tried to brush it off, plastering a smile on her face as she steered her friends toward a table in the back. But her discomfort was obvious. She could feel the shift in the air, the weight of it pressing on her chest. Eleanor wasn't just a grandmother anymore, she was a force. Eleanor watched Olivia out of the corner of her eye, her calm gaze never wavering. She continued speaking to Jake, her tone light, as if nothing had changed. "We'll need to refine the menu a bit, Jake. Add some seasonal options, make it more exclusive. People are looking for an experience, not just a meal, and we can offer that." Sophia chuckled, her voice low. "You really are something else, Eleanor. You've turned this whole place upside down with a smile." Eleanor's smile deepened, a small but satisfied expression of quiet triumph. "I haven't turned anything upside down. I've just made sure they understand who's in charge." As she said the words, her eyes never left Olivia. She could feel the tension in the room, could almost taste the shift in the air. Olivia had thought she could control the narrative. She had thought her grandmother was a relic, a figure from the past who didn't belong in her world. But now, here she was, claiming her space, and Olivia was the one out of place. Eleanor raised her glass of sparkling water, clinking it gently against Sophia's. "Here's to new beginnings, to teaching lessons in the most elegant of ways." Across the room, Olivia sat in silence, her eyes flicking nervously between her friends and Eleanor. She couldn't escape the feeling that something monumental had shifted, something she couldn't control. Eleanor smiled again, a quiet satisfaction filling her chest. Olivia would learn. She always did. Olivia stood frozen for a moment, her eyes flicking from the table at the back of the cafe to the one Eleanor occupied with such effortless authority. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected her grandmother to be sitting in the heart of the cafe, surrounded by attention, no longer relegated to the margins of her world. The shift in the room was palpable. There was no mistaking it. Eleanor was no longer the quiet, reserved figure she'd once been. She was now a presence, commanding and undeniable. Olivia's fingers tightened around the edge of the chair she was about to sit in, but she didn't. Instead, she hesitated. The laughter and chatter of her friends seemed muffled now, as if the sound of the cafe had been replaced by the pounding of her own heart. The weight of Eleanor's gaze from across the room was enough to make her stomach twist with unease. She'd seen her grandmother's strength before, but not like this. Not in this space. Olivia had always believed that her world, her circle, her way of doing things, was the one that mattered. But today, Eleanor was showing her a different side, a side that wasn't meant to be ignored. Finally, Olivia pushed away from the table, her body moving of its own accord. She could feel every step as if the ground beneath her feet was growing heavier with each one. She approached Eleanor, her heart hammering in her chest. Eleanor didn't immediately acknowledge her. She was calm, collected, sipping her coffee, her posture unbothered. It was as if nothing in the room could touch her. It was a power Olivia hadn't seen before, quiet, but undeniable. A power that emanated from every line of Eleanor's body, from the way she held herself, from the sheer confidence that now radiated from her. Olivia stopped a few feet away, her mouth dry. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come easily. When she finally spoke, her voice was thin, tinged with uncertainty. "Grandma," she began, her gaze flickering toward the table where her friend still sat, the unease clear in her movements. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just, you know how it is." Eleanor set her coffee cup down slowly, her fingers grazing the rim before her gaze lifted to meet Olivia's. It wasn't an angry look, or a disappointed one. It was something far more profound. Eleanor's eyes were calm, but there was something in them that made Olivia feel as if she were being dissected. The words came, soft but steady. "It's okay, darling," Eleanor said, her voice even, carrying the weight of experience. "I've always been classy, just not the way you thought." Olivia flinched, as though the words had struck deeper than anything she'd expected. She opened her mouth to respond, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. She wasn't prepared for this, for Eleanor's unwavering composure, her quiet dignity. The grand facade Olivia had built around her own world, around her social circle, was suddenly crumbling, and she didn't know how to hold on to it. "I didn't mean it like that," Olivia repeated, this time more to herself than to Eleanor. She struggled to grasp onto her earlier bravado, but it was slipping. The tight, controlled facade she had once relied on to mask her insecurity was now faltering in the face of her grandmother's calm strength. But Eleanor, ever poised, didn't let her finish. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze sharp, but her tone gentle. "Class is not about appearance, Olivia. It's about respect. For yourself. For others. It's the way you carry yourself when no one is watching, and the way you treat others, even when they can't offer you something in return." Olivia swallowed, her breath catching in her throat. She wanted to speak, to make an excuse, but she couldn't. Not anymore. Not when the words Eleanor spoke had cut through the armor she had spent years building. She had always thought that class was about wealth, about being seen at the right places, wearing the right clothes. That was what she'd been taught, wasn't it? But here was Eleanor, showing her a different kind of class. A class that had nothing to do with the superficial things Olivia had clung to. Eleanor didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She was simply herself. For a long moment, the silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Olivia didn't know what to say. The words she had been so certain of, her defenses, her excuses, seemed utterly irrelevant now. Her world, the one she had always felt so sure of, had been turned on its head. Eleanor sat back in her chair, her eyes never leaving Olivia. "Olivia," she said softly, It's not about fitting into a mold or impressing others. It's about staying true to who you are, no matter who's watching. You'll find that real class, real strength, comes from within. Olivia's eyes blurred slightly, the sting of embarrassment starting to rise in her chest. She had never been good at being vulnerable, never allowed herself to feel small, but here, with Eleanor's calm gaze fixed on her, she felt it. The weight of her own actions, the emptiness of her judgments. She was silent, a swirl of emotions turning inside her, her thoughts too tangled to form into coherent words. Eleanor reached for her coffee again, lifting it slowly as if she were savoring the moment. You'll understand, eventually. But it has to come from you. No one else can teach you this but yourself. Olivia stood there, feeling the quiet gravity of her grandmother's words sinking in. She wasn't sure if she was ready to admit it yet, but deep down, she knew Eleanor was right. There was a kind of class that had nothing to do with what you wore, where you went, or who you knew. It had to do with the way you lived, how you treated others, and how you carried yourself through the world, no matter the judgments others passed on you. Olivia swallowed, her throat tight. The lesson wasn't over, but she was beginning to see the shape of it. And for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, Eleanor had been right all along. The cafe had a different feel now. There was an energy in the air, something that hadn't been there before. Eleanor's influence was seeping in slowly, quietly, like a gentle wave that lifted everything in its path. She'd done this before, turned things around in subtle ways, knowing how to press the right buttons and get the machine humming. This time, it wasn't just about business. It was about making a statement. Eleanor sat at her usual spot, a prime table near the front, sipping her coffee as she scanned the cafe, her gaze sharp, calculating. Jake, the owner, was running around, trying to keep up with the influx of customers who had suddenly discovered the cafe's new appeal. She had already suggested a few menu changes, simple, elegant, but trendy, the kind of dishes that would turn heads on Instagram and leave customers coming back for more. But it wasn't just about food, it was about an experience. Jake, she called across the room, her voice smooth but commanding. We need to do a VIP hour, a special time for our most loyal customers. Something that feels exclusive, but accessible. You know how people love to feel special. Jake wiped his brow, nodding enthusiastically. That's brilliant. I hadn't even thought of it. I can make it work. Eleanor smiled, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of her cup. She didn't need to say much more. She had an instinct for this kind of thing. How to make people feel like they were part of something bigger, something special. Something that couldn't be replicated anywhere else. As she sat there, deep in thought, Olivia walked in. Her posture was stiff, her gaze flicking nervously between the staff and the patrons who now filled the cafe in a steady stream. It was the same place, the same environment, but the energy had changed and Olivia felt it. She didn't want to be here. Not today. Not now. She made her way toward the back of the cafe, avoiding the table where Eleanor was sitting. Her grandmother was calm, collected. Her presence a quiet reminder of the power she had taken, the ground she had claimed. Eleanor didn't look up as Olivia walked past, but the subtle shift in Olivia's posture, the way she held her shoulders a little higher, tried to walk a little straighter, didn't go unnoticed. She was trying to regain control of the situation, but it wasn't as easy as it once was. Jake, noticing the tension in the air, approached Eleanor. Sales are up, he said, a bit breathless. I don't know if it's just the changes or the new vibe, but something's definitely working. Eleanor nodded, her eyes gliding over the bustling cafe. It's not just the food or the atmosphere, it's about how people feel when they walk in here. They have to feel like they belong, like they matter. As she spoke, she caught the eye of one of the waitstaff, a young woman named Lisa, who had just delivered a drink to a table. Eleanor gestured for her to come over. "Lisa," she said softly, a warm smile on her face. "It's not just about the service. It's about the connection you make with people. Treat every customer like they're the most important person in the room. People will remember how they feel when they're here, not just what they eat or drink." Lisa nodded, her eyes wide with understanding. Eleanor didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to force anything. She had a way of making people want to do better, to be better, simply by making them feel seen. Across the room, Olivia sat at a corner table, her eyes flicking uneasily toward her grandmother. She was trying to ignore the changes, trying to pretend like nothing had shifted, but the reality was too glaring. Eleanor was everywhere now, quietly pulling the strings, shaping this place into something that Olivia couldn't ignore. The cafe wasn't just a cafe anymore, it was a symbol. And it was Eleanor's. Olivia sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. She had never thought of it this way. She had never imagined that Eleanor, of all people, would carve out a space for herself in this world, a world that had always seemed to revolve around Olivia. The cafe, once just a casual place to meet with friends, now felt like a reflection of everything Olivia had failed to understand. Her grandmother wasn't just holding her own, she was reshaping everything, with a quiet strength that Olivia couldn't quite grasp. Eleanor caught Olivia's eye for the briefest of moments, and in that look, there was a message. "This is what class really looks like." Olivia swallowed hard, the taste of defeat sitting heavy in her mouth. She had underestimated Eleanor in ways she couldn't even begin to articulate. She had thought her grandmother was out of touch, a relic of a time she no longer fit into. But here, Eleanor was, turning everything upside down with a soft smile, with grace, with an understanding of people that Olivia was only beginning to comprehend. "Keep an eye on Olivia," Eleanor said to Jake, who was now standing nearby, watching the scene unfold. "She'll come around, but in the meantime, let her watch. Let her see what it means to create something real." Jake looked at Eleanor with a new level of respect, his mind still catching up to the scope of what was happening in front of him. Olivia, sitting in the corner, was beginning to realize just how much her grandmother had done. Not just for the cafe, but for herself. And for the first time, Olivia wondered if she could ever be as strong as Eleanor had been all along. The invitation came as a surprise, though Eleanor had expected it. The local charity gala, an exclusive event that had been a fixture in Beverly Hills for years, had always been an occasion for the city's elite. But this time, they were extending an invitation to her. To Eleanor Brooks, the quiet businesswoman who had suddenly turned the cafe she frequented into a local sensation. She accepted without hesitation. She didn't need to ponder whether it was the right thing to do. Eleanor knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't just about attending an event. It was about cementing her place in the community. It was about making sure people saw her not as the woman in the corner, but as someone who shaped her own world. The gala was held at one of the grandest hotels in Beverly Hills, and as Eleanor entered, she couldn't help but feel the weight of all the eyes that turned toward her. The room buzzed with the kind of quiet admiration she had grown accustomed to over the years, but now there was a subtle shift in the air. People whispered, some of them trying to place her, others simply marveling at the ease with which she navigated the crowd. Eleanor didn't just blend in, she commanded attention without lifting a finger. The dress she had chosen for the night was understated yet elegant, the kind of timeless design that spoke volumes without shouting. She was, as always, perfectly poised. She moved through the room with grace, accepting compliments with a gentle smile, never needing to boast. Her presence was enough. As she spoke with a few local philanthropists, she caught sight of Olivia, standing across the room, eyes glued to her phone. Her posture was stiff. and the forced smile on her face was something Eleanor had come to recognize. It was the look of someone trying to pretend they weren't feeling the sting of competition. Eleanor gave her a small nod, but Olivia didn't return it. The gap between them felt wider now, the distance more palpable than it had ever been before. "You've really outdone yourself," a woman's voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Vanessa, one of the event organizers, and the admiration in her eyes was unmistakable. "We're all talking about your cafe. It's just such a breath of fresh air. Everyone's buzzing about it. You've created something truly special." Eleanor nodded, grateful but not needing to say much. "I'm just helping where I can," she replied, her voice warm. "It's about creating a place people can feel at home. You know?" The conversation shifted to other matters, but Eleanor felt a surge of pride. This was what Olivia had missed, what she still couldn't see. It wasn't about what was in front of you, it was about how you made people feel. And now, Eleanor had found her way to make people feel seen, heard, and valued. Back at the cafe, the changes were undeniable. The once quiet corner spot had become the hot ticket in town. Influencers flocked to the cafe, snapping photos of their artisanal lattes and the trendy dishes Eleanor had introduced. People wanted to be seen there, and Eleanor had become the key to the cafe's growing reputation. Olivia, still stung by her grandmother's quiet dominance, began to notice the change in the people around her. Her friends, who once sneered at Eleanor's old-fashioned ways, now spoke about her with something like reverence. It started slowly, a comment here or there, but eventually Olivia couldn't ignore the shift. "She's actually kind of classy," Olivia overheard one of her friends say while scrolling through her phone. "I mean, I didn't get it at first, but there's something about her. I think she knows exactly what she's doing." The words stung more than Olivia cared to admit. She had spent so much time trying to define her own sense of class by appearances, by what could be seen from the outside. But her grandmother had built something far more enduring than a carefully curated image. It was something that couldn't be replicated with filters or designer labels. Eleanor, on the other hand, had seen through all of that. She wasn't trying to compete. She was creating something that would last. Something built on the respect of others, not their admiration. One afternoon, Olivia finally walked into the cafe after hearing yet another rumor about its latest success. This time, she didn't hide in the corner. She sat at a table near the front, her eyes scanning the room. The place was alive with the hum of conversation, the clink of silverware, and the bustle of waiters. It was nothing like the quiet, almost hidden space it had once been. Eleanor's touch was everywhere. She caught her grandmother's eye across the room, and for the first time, Olivia didn't look away. She stood, her steps slow but sure, and made her way over to the table where Eleanor was sitting. "You were right," Olivia said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of more than just an apology. "I underestimated you." Eleanor's gaze softened, but there was no hint of victory in her eyes, only understanding. "No one's ever too old to learn something new, darling." Olivia's heart tightened at the sincerity in her grandmother's voice. She had spent so long thinking of Eleanor as someone who didn't understand, someone who had been left behind. But Eleanor was moving ahead, building something that had real substance, something that was hers. And Olivia could see now, truly see, that Eleanor had always known exactly what she was doing. "I think I understand now," Olivia said, her voice breaking the silence. "Class isn't about being seen or about what people think. It's about how you make people feel." Eleanor smiled, a rare warmth in her expression. "Exactly." The shift in Olivia was palpable, as though the weight of her own judgments had lifted, and for the first time, she wasn't trying to keep up with anyone. She was simply being. Eleanor raised her glass of water, a quiet toast to the future. "You're learning, darling, slowly but surely, and that's enough. As Olivia sat down across from her, a small weight lifted from her chest. She had a long way to go, but she was starting to understand. She didn't need to compete with her grandmother anymore. She could simply appreciate what Eleanor had built, and perhaps, in time, learn how to build something of her own. And Eleanor, for the first time in a long while, felt the kind of peace that came with knowing her legacy wasn't just about the cafe or the fame it brought. It was about the lessons that would stay with Olivia long after the buzz had faded. The cafe buzzed with the energy of a place on the rise. Conversations swirled around the room, mingling with the sharp clink of glasses and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Olivia entered first, her friends following closely behind, their laughter betraying an awkwardness beneath the surface. The atmosphere in the cafe had changed in ways that made them all feel a little out of place, though none of them would admit it out loud. Olivia was keenly aware of it. The place that had once been their secret, their go-to hideaway, had now become the hotspot in town. The polished aesthetic, the menu updates, the curated experiences, everything about it screamed exclusivity, a far cry from the laid-back charm it used to offer. Her friends, still with the same cool detachment they'd always carried, scanned the room, the faintest traces of admiration in their eyes as they took in the transformation. They noticed it too. The cafe wasn't just a place to grab a quick bite anymore, it was the place to be seen. But Olivia wasn't quite sure how she felt about it, or about her grandmother's newfound role as the undisputed matriarch of it all. They made their way toward a table near the back, as if instinctively avoiding the central stage. The seats at the front had already been claimed by Eleanor. Eleanor sat there like she always had, but now she didn't fade into the background. She was a presence. Her posture was impeccable, her demeanor poised, the essence of grace, and she was looking right at them. Olivia froze for a split second. There, at the best table in the cafe, was Eleanor. But this time, she wasn't a forgotten relic of the past. She was an undeniable force, calm, composed, and regal in every sense of the word. Olivia felt a pang of something sharp, unfamiliar. It was as if her grandmother had always been there, silently waiting to claim this very moment, and now that moment had arrived. Her friends were the first to react, exchanging glances and quiet murmurs. Olivia felt her stomach tighten, but she masked it with a quick flicker of a smile. "We should sit somewhere else," one of her friends said, but Olivia shook her head quickly, not wanting to seem too obvious in her discomfort. "No, it's fine," she replied, trying to sound casual, though her voice lacked the usual confidence. With measured steps, she walked toward the table, her friends following suit, all of them trying to act as though they weren't aware of the shift in the room. But Eleanor's eyes were on them as they approached. There was no escaping it. She was unbothered, calm in the face of the discomfort she had unknowingly caused. As they drew closer, Eleanor's smile was warm, but there was no mistaking the depth of control in her gaze. "Olivia," she said softly, her voice gentle but commanding, as though everything about the moment had already been orchestrated. "It's so good to see you." Olivia's mouth went dry. The words felt like an understatement, like the air had been thickened with something deeper, something she couldn't quite name. Her friends took their seats, visibly trying to act like they weren't being watched, though the weight of Eleanor's presence seemed to command the room. Everyone else was still in their own world, but this moment, felt like it was unfolding just for them. Olivia could barely meet her grandmother's eyes. She wanted to respond, to say something that would undo the unease she felt crawling under her skin, but the words weren't there. Instead, she stumbled over a weak attempt at small talk. "I see you're, holding court today," she muttered, a forced smile tugging at her lips. Eleanor's gaze never wavered. "I suppose I am," she said. the quiet satisfaction in her tone more of a statement than an answer. She reached for the menu, but before Olivia could say anything else, Eleanor's voice cut through the moment again, cool and effortless. "I'll have the finest bottle of wine you have," Eleanor said to the waiter, who had appeared by her side, almost as if summoned by her mere presence. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, each word carrying the weight of an unspoken command. Her posture didn't shift, her demeanor as composed as ever, even as she gestured slightly with one hand for the wine to be brought over. The waiter nodded respectfully, clearly taken aback by the quiet authority she exuded, and hurried off to fulfill the order. Olivia, who had tried to hold her ground with a casual comment, could only watch as her grandmother effortlessly turned the moment in her favor. The cafe, it seemed, belonged to Eleanor now in ways Olivia hadn't yet fully understood. Her friends exchanged a few more glances, their discomfort almost palpable, though none dared to make a sound. Olivia, who had once prided herself on being the center of attention, now felt like an outsider at her own table. Eleanor, the one she had underestimated, had found her place here, not just as a grandmother, but as someone who commanded the respect of everyone in the room. As the wine was brought to the table and poured with a slight flourish, Eleanor took a small sip, her eyes never leaving Olivia's. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath. Olivia didn't know whether to feel embarrassed or awed, and the uncertainty made her throat close tight. The faint hum of conversation around them seemed far away now, and the reality hit Olivia harder than she expected. Her grandmother wasn't just a part of this cafe. She had become the essence of it. Olivia shifted in her seat, but no words came. The space between them, once filled with unspoken tension, had now shifted in an even more significant way. Eleanor wasn't just part of her world anymore. She had claimed her own. And for the first time, Olivia wasn't sure where she fit into it. The silence between them stretched on, and as Olivia glanced away, her heart skipped. It wasn't just about the cafe anymore. It was about everything that had changed, and everything that had always been right in front of her. Eleanor had built something more than a cafe. She had built a legacy, and Olivia, with all her pride and ambition, was left wondering if she would ever be able to do the same. The morning light poured through the cafe's windows, casting soft golden rays across the tables. It was another busy day, the hum of chatter filling the air as people sipped their drinks and nibbled on the trendy dishes Eleanor had carefully curated. Olivia arrived with her usual entourage, a little more subdued than usual, her eyes darting around as she entered. She was still adjusting, trying to process the changes, and the lingering tension from their last encounter was hanging between them like a weight. But today wasn't going to be like the others. Eleanor had planned it meticulously, the way she always did. She had a way of showing up at the exact right moment, her presence a reminder that she was no longer just a part of the cafe's success. She was the driving force behind it. As the door to the cafe swung open, Olivia looked up, expecting to see the usual crowd, the staff, the humdrum of a typical morning. But what she wasn't prepared for was her grandmother. Eleanor entered with an air of elegance that commanded attention. The soft rustle of fabric followed her every step, and for a moment, the room seemed to hush, as though collectively holding its breath. She wore a dress that seemed made just for her. A sleek, modern creation from one of the most renowned designers of the moment. It was daring in a way that only Eleanor could pull off. A sharp silhouette with contemporary lines, but made timeless by its exquisite craftsmanship. The deep jewel tones of emerald and sapphire complemented her perfectly, the fabric hugging her figure with a confidence that matched her demeanor. Olivia's eyes widened, her mouth momentarily dry. She had never expected Eleanor to step out like this, to wear something that spoke so much to the present while maintaining the class she had always embodied. The dress wasn't just stylish, it was a statement. a statement that Eleanor, at 68, could still compete in the world Olivia and her friends inhabited, a world defined by appearances, labels, and the latest trends. She stood there for a moment, taking it all in. Olivia could hear her heart pounding in her chest. Her friends exchanged glances, some admiration in their eyes, others masking surprise. Olivia's discomfort was palpable, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like the one who didn't belong. Eleanor wasn't just present, she was alive in a way that made Olivia question everything she thought she understood about her. It wasn't just the dress. It was the way Eleanor carried it. Every movement was purposeful, every step deliberate, as if she had been waiting for this moment to remind the world of her quiet power. She walked over to a regular customer, a young woman sitting near the counter who often came in to work on her laptop. Eleanor struck up a conversation with her, speaking about the latest trends with ease, discussing the importance of individuality while staying ahead of the curve. Her tone was warm, but there was a clear authority in the way she spoke. It wasn't just that she was knowledgeable, it was that people listened when she spoke. The exchange, though casual, radiated a quiet command, a mastery of social dynamics that no one could ignore. Olivia watched from her table, trying to maintain her composure. Her friends were visibly impressed, some whispering about the dress, others commenting on how effortlessly Eleanor fit into this new scene. Olivia couldn't deny it anymore. Her grandmother had transcended the boundaries of age and expectation. As Eleanor returned to her table, she made a point of acknowledging the staff, exchanging pleasantries, offering gentle words of encouragement. The cafe staff, who had always been courteous but distant, now greeted her with newfound respect. There was no doubt about it. Eleanor had become the centerpiece of the cafe, the figurehead around which everything revolved. Olivia's unease grew. She had always prided herself on knowing exactly where she fit in, on being the one who set the tone. But now, with Eleanor at the forefront, she was starting to feel like a shadow in her own world. She tried to ignore the uncomfortable sensation creeping in, but it was becoming impossible to shake. Her friends continued to talk about Eleanor, their voices laced with admiration. "She really does have something about her," one of them said, a touch of awe in her tone. "It's like she doesn't even have to try." Olivia shifted in her seat, the weight of the words sinking in. She felt the walls she had carefully built around herself starting to crumble. This cafe, which she had once seen as her space, was no longer just a backdrop for her social life. It was a reflection of everything Eleanor had been building, quietly, confidently, without the need for validation from anyone. And now, Olivia felt herself slipping further into the background. Eleanor, as though sensing Olivia's discomfort, glanced over her shoulder and met her gaze. There was no smugness in her eyes, no triumph, just a steady, knowing look, as if to say, "You see now, don't you?" The realization hit Olivia harder than anything before. Eleanor wasn't just wearing the dress, she was wearing her success, her strength, her essence, for everyone to see. And as she sat there, calm and collected, surrounded by the hum of admiration, Olivia realized that the gap between them was no longer about age or status. It was about the quiet, unshakable foundation Eleanor had built, one that was now standing firmly at the center of everything. For the first time, Olivia wasn't just impressed. She was unsettled. And deep down, she knew that Eleanor had already won. The idea came to Eleanor over a quiet lunch, her mind wandering over the cafe's new rhythm. The line between what the cafe had once been and what it was becoming had blurred. The foot traffic had doubled, and the buzz in the air was different. More polished, more refined. She needed something that could capitalize on the momentum, something that would set the cafe even further apart from the rest, but it had to be subtle. Eleanor never believed in being overt. The power of subtlety was where true influence lay. A high tea experience seemed like the perfect fit. At first, Olivia didn't think much of it when she overheard Eleanor talking to Jake about the plans. "Who would want to come for high tea?" Olivia had asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. "It sounds old-fashioned. Who's even going to bother?" But Eleanor just smiled, the corners of her lips curling slightly. "You'd be surprised, darling. There's something timeless about the elegance of it. People want to escape the chaos for a while and experience something refined. They want an experience, not just a meal." Olivia dismissed it, assuming it would be another fleeting idea, a passing fancy that wouldn't go anywhere. She didn't think much more of it when the first flyers for Eleanor's high tea experience appeared in the cafe, or when a few influencers posted about it on social media. In fact, she thought the idea might fizzle out in a week or two, like so many others before it. It didn't feel like it belonged in the world she inhabited, a world of fast trends and instant gratification. But she couldn't have been more wrong. The first high tea event sold out within hours. Eleanor had carefully curated the menu: classic teas, delicate finger sandwiches, decadent pastries, and the cafe was transformed for the occasion. Soft jazz played in the background, the atmosphere refined but not stiff. The guests felt like they were part of something exclusive, yet warm, inviting. A line of people eager to be part of the event had started forming outside well before the doors opened. Olivia was stunned when she saw the crowd, an eclectic mix of people from all walks of life. And they weren't just any patrons. They were influencers, local socialites, business owners, and families who wanted to experience the charm of the high tea firsthand. By the second event, it was clear. Eleanor had created something more than just a niche offering. She had created an experience people couldn't resist. The cafe, already gaining traction, was now receiving glowing praise in local publications and online. The high tea was a hit. It wasn't just about tea. It was about crafting a moment of luxury, an escape from the hustle and bustle of the everyday. Eleanor didn't need to say much to anyone. People spoke for her. They marveled at how the cafe had changed, how it had evolved into a symbol of sophistication without losing its heart. The shift had been slow, but now it was undeniable. And yet, Olivia held on to her doubts. She still couldn't fully comprehend how her grandmother had turned this small, quiet cafe into a destination. She was still struggling with the realization that Eleanor had found a way to own her space, to transform it into something far more powerful than Olivia had ever thought possible. A few days later, Olivia and her friends decided to attend one of the high tea sessions, if only to see what all the fuss was about. She still didn't quite believe it would be as successful as everyone claimed, but a part of her was curious. Curious to see her grandmother in action, to understand how Eleanor had pulled it all together. They arrived just as the event was beginning, the soft murmur of conversation and the clink of china filling the air. Olivia tried to ignore the feeling of being out of place as she stepped inside. Her friends were animated, chatting amongst themselves, but Olivia felt the weight of the moment. Her grandmother, seated at a table near the front, caught her eye. The look on Eleanor's face was one of quiet satisfaction. There was no smugness, no triumph. Just calm, unwavering confidence. Eleanor greeted her with a smile. Warm, but knowing. "It's good to see you, Olivia. Welcome to the tea." Olivia felt her throat tighten, and for a moment she didn't know what to say. She was caught between two worlds. Her own, the one she thought she knew, and the one Eleanor had so quietly, so confidently, created. It was a world that didn't need to prove anything to anyone. It was its own statement. As they sat down, Olivia tried to mask her discomfort. Her friends, though outwardly unfazed, kept glancing at Eleanor with a mix of admiration and curiosity. They couldn't help but comment on how elegant the whole affair was, how polished and effortless the experience felt. Your grandmother really knows how to do this, one of Olivia's friends said, sipping her tea, her eyes scanning the room. This is classy, you know? It's kind of impressive. Olivia shifted in her seat. The compliment wasn't for her. It was for Eleanor. And as much as Olivia tried to focus on the chatter around her, her mind kept drifting back to the cafe's success, to how it had all changed without her realizing it. She looked at Eleanor again, who was calmly overseeing the event, chatting with a few of the guests. There was no tension in her posture, no sign of doubt. It was as if she belonged here, had always belonged here. And Olivia, for the first time, found herself on the outside, looking in. The realization hit her slowly, then all at once. Eleanor had reinvented herself, and everything around her. She had created something real, something that no one, not even Olivia, could deny. It was no longer just about the cafe. It was about the power of subtlety, of quiet dominance. And Olivia wasn't sure where she fit into this new picture anymore. Eleanor sat back, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup as she glanced around the cafe. The familiar hum of conversation surrounded her, but her thoughts were elsewhere, drifting to the changes she had quietly set in motion. Sophia sat across from her, the two of them sharing a moment of peace amidst the subtle flurry of activity in the cafe. I don't think I've ever seen it like this, Sophia said, shaking her head in quiet awe. It's like you've transformed the place into something else entirely. Something more. Eleanor smiled, a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. It's all about creating the right space, Sophia. A space where people feel valued, where they want to come back not just for the food, but for the feeling of belonging. Charlotte, always the quiet observer, nodded from her place at the table, her gentle demeanor a perfect complement to Eleanor's confidence. It's amazing how much more personal this place feels now. It's not just a cafe anymore. It's a community. Eleanor's gaze softened as she looked at her longtime friends, feeling the warmth of their support and shared history. They understood her in ways others couldn't, not just for her success, but for the person she was beneath it all. The conversation shifted, light and easy, but Olivia's entrance into the scene was inevitable. She stood by the door for a moment, as if trying to find her place within the quiet, insular group that had formed around her grandmother. Eleanor, who had caught sight of Olivia the moment she walked in, didn't hesitate. Her eyes met Olivia's with a subtle invitation, a silent recognition of the shift that had been taking place. Olivia hesitated, her eyes darting between her grandmother and the table. She could feel the distance between herself and the small circle of people that Eleanor had cultivated over the years. They weren't just patrons, they were friends. Real friends, those who had always valued Eleanor for her heart, not just her wealth or her new role in the cafe's success. Eleanor smiled gently, motioning for Olivia to join them. Come, sit down, darling. It's good to have you here. Olivia, feeling the weight of her grandmother's steady gaze, took a seat. She tried to ease into the conversation, her words forced, though her tone was warm. I'm glad to see things going so well, she said, smiling at Sophia and Charlotte. It's clear this place is more than just a cafe now. But the moment she sat down, Olivia could feel the slight tension in the air. It wasn't that her grandmother's friends weren't welcoming, it was something deeper. It was the familiarity they shared, a bond that had been formed long before Olivia had fully realized the true value of those relationships. These weren't just people who admired Eleanor from a distance. These were people who had supported her through the quiet moments, through the years of hard work that had led her to this place. The conversation quickly deepened as Charlotte spoke about a young woman who had visited the cafe earlier in the week. She came in for some advice on her own business venture, Charlotte said. She's really looking for guidance, and I think Eleanor gave her some excellent advice. It's amazing how many young women are drawn to you, Eleanor. Eleanor nodded, her face warm with approval. I've always believed that mentorship is as important as anything we do here. It's about sharing knowledge, about giving others the tools to succeed. That's what's truly lasting. Olivia watched the exchange, noticing how effortlessly Eleanor had stepped into this role. Her friends weren't just admiring her, they were listening to her, valuing her for the wisdom she had accumulated, not just her success. It wasn't about the cafe anymore. It was about the deep connections she had fostered, the meaningful relationships that ran beneath the surface. As the conversation continued, Olivia found herself on the outside. She had tried to step in, but the bond between Eleanor and her friends was like a warm, insular world, one that Olivia wasn't yet a part of. She had spent so much time focusing on her own image, on the superficiality of being seen, that she had never truly understood the power of genuine connection. It was here, in these quiet moments, in these shared stories and mutual respect, that true influence was born. As the afternoon stretched on, more guests began arriving, greeted by Eleanor with a calm, composed demeanor. Her effortless ability to connect with everyone around her, whether they were old friends, new customers, or aspiring businesswomen, was something Olivia couldn't ignore. After a while, Olivia stood to leave, her heart heavy with the realization of just how much she had underestimated her grandmother. As she walked toward the door, she couldn't help but notice how the staff, once more reserved, now greeted Eleanor with an even greater sense of reverence. The atmosphere had shifted. It was clear now. Eleanor wasn't just a part of the cafe. She was the cafe. And Olivia, despite her growing admiration for her grandmother, felt a pang of something deeper, a mix of regret, envy, and a yearning to understand this new world Eleanor had created. She stepped outside, the weight of the moment pressing in on her chest. Her friends, still inside, were discussing the next big thing at the cafe, eager to know what Eleanor's next move would be. Olivia's thoughts, however, were elsewhere. It wasn't just about the cafe anymore. It was about the friendships, the bonds, and the way Eleanor had shown her that true strength came from what was built over time, not what could be bought or borrowed. And for the first time, Olivia wasn't sure if she had what it took to build that kind of lasting legacy. Eleanor's days had taken on a new rhythm, one filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and a quiet but firm hand in the cafe's operations. It wasn't enough for her to simply own the place anymore. She had made herself an integral part of it, her influence subtly woven into every corner of the cafe, from the menu to the staff's interactions with customers. She attended meetings with suppliers, personally reviewing inventory and negotiating better deals, and even helped manage the finances. Her expertise, once reserved for the boardrooms of her past business ventures, was now being used to shape the cafe into a thriving hub of sophistication and inclusivity. As Eleanor sat at the head of the table with Jake, discussing the cafe's next big step, Olivia tried to act as if she weren't paying attention, but it was impossible to ignore the growing influence her grandmother was exerting. Eleanor had always been a force, but now it was as if her presence had overtaken the entire cafe. It wasn't just about the cafe anymore. It was about everything. The atmosphere was shifting, changing, and Olivia, despite her attempts to act unaffected, couldn't help but feel a sense of displacement. She had grown used to being in control of her own world, her social circle, and now it was as if she was watching from the sidelines as Eleanor reinvented herself, as well as everything around her. Olivia would walk into the cafe, but it was no longer her space. It was Eleanor's. The real turning point came when Eleanor invited a group of influencers to the cafe to showcase the exclusive high tea experience. Olivia's friends, who had once criticized Eleanor's old-fashioned approach, were now clamoring for an invitation. Olivia, still clinging to her judgment, watched from a distance as the cafe's popularity surged. She had always dismissed Eleanor's efforts as trivial, assuming the buzz would fade. But with every post on social media, every glowing review, it became clear that Eleanor had managed to cultivate something real, something lasting. The influencers, dressed in their latest styles, had arrived with an aura of excitement. Eleanor greeted them with the grace of someone who had been hosting high-profile events her entire life, guiding them through the cafe's offerings with ease. There was no pretension in her tone, just a quiet confidence that invited people to take her seriously. She didn't need to boast. She didn't need to prove anything. She simply was. As the influencers posed for pictures and sampled the cafe's delights, Olivia stood by, her arms crossed, trying to remain calm, trying to maintain the illusion of indifference. But beneath the surface, she could feel the familiar sting of jealousy, the uncertainty of her place in this world Eleanor had so seamlessly mastered. Her friends, once the center of attention, were now drawn to Eleanor. "Your grandmother is incredible," one of them remarked, sipping tea. "She has this effortless elegance. I mean, she's always been classy, but now how do you even describe it?" Olivia forced a smile, but the discomfort was growing inside her. Her friends, the same ones who had dismissed Eleanor, now found themselves swept up in her world. They were no longer speaking about her grandmother with condescension. They were in awe of her ability to blend timeless elegance with modern trends, of how she had turned the cafe into something worth talking about. Eleanor noticed Olivia's unease from across the room and gave her a small, knowing smile. It wasn't a smile of victory, it was simply a quiet acknowledgement, as if to say, "You're learning." Later, when the event had wound down, Eleanor received an invitation to speak at a business seminar about reinvention in class. She had been asked to share her insights on how to adapt in a changing world, how to stay relevant without losing sight of one's core values. The topic resonated deeply with Eleanor. It was something she had done in her career, and now it was something she was doing with the cafe. Olivia attended the seminar, though she had no interest in the topic. She had hoped to sit in the back, to remain unnoticed, but she couldn't escape the magnetic pull of her grandmother's presence. As Eleanor took the stage, the room fell into a respectful silence. Her speech wasn't grandiose. It wasn't meant to be. She spoke simply, clearly, about the importance of staying true to one's vision while embracing change. She talked about adapting, evolving, but never losing sight of the core values that made a business, or a person, authentic. "I've built everything I have through relationships," Eleanor said, her voice steady, captivating. "People trust you not because of the shiny exterior you present, but because they know you believe in what you do. If you're genuine, the success will follow." The room erupted into applause, and Olivia felt a twinge of something she couldn't quite name. It was admiration, yes, but also a deep insecurity she hadn't expected. Eleanor was speaking with such grace and clarity, her words resonating with an authority Olivia had never known her to have. It was as if Eleanor had been quietly preparing for this moment her entire life, building toward it with every decision she made. And now, here she was, standing at the forefront of a new wave of business leaders, redefining what it meant to be successful. Afterward, people flocked to Eleanor to congratulate her. Olivia watched as her grandmother engaged with people, offering advice, asking questions, building connections that were founded on something real, something that went beyond the surface. Olivia, still trying to hide her discomfort, approached her grandmother. She had always prided herself on knowing exactly what to say in every situation, but now, in the presence of Eleanor's quiet power, she was unsure. "Grandma," Olivia said, trying to sound casual, "you are incredible up there. I didn't expect it to be so inspiring." Eleanor smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "Thank you, darling," she said. "But it wasn't me alone. It's about being open to change, to new ideas, to growing." Olivia paused, her throat tightening as the weight of her grandmother's words sank in. To growing. That was the lesson Eleanor had always known, the one Olivia was just beginning to understand. The world didn't revolve around popularity or instant gratification. It was about the connections you made, the integrity you maintained, and the ability to evolve. As Olivia walked away, she couldn't help but feel the magnitude of what had changed, not just in the cafe, but in herself. Eleanor had found her place, her power, and Olivia was only just beginning to understand the true meaning of success. And deep down, Olivia knew that no matter how much she tried to catch up, the space between them was only going to grow. The weight of Eleanor's presence had become impossible to ignore. The cafe, now a bustling institution, no longer just reflected her influence. It was a monument to her quiet strength, her ability to turn every challenge into an opportunity. For months now, Olivia had watched from the sidelines, her admiration for her grandmother growing alongside her own growing sense of insecurity. The more Olivia observed, the more she realized that Eleanor was something she could never quite replicate. Her grandmother's ability to navigate the world with poise, to rise above the shallow expectations that so often governed youth and beauty, was something far beyond what Olivia had been taught to value. Eleanor didn't need to chase attention. She didn't need the validation that came from social media likes or public admiration. She had something more enduring, something that would last long after the fleeting trends of the moment had passed. Olivia had tried to keep pace with her. She tried to mimic Eleanor's success, to step into the role of the confident, self-assured woman, but she was never quite able to achieve it. While Eleanor's grace and dignity came naturally, Olivia found herself constantly fighting to project an image of control. She knew how to play the game, how to appear composed, but deep down, she felt like an imposter. Eleanor, meanwhile, had embraced everything that came her way with grace. She handled media attention and public appearances effortlessly, her every word measured, every gesture deliberate. Journalists praised her for her insights into business, her ability to blend tradition with innovation. She was becoming an icon, and Olivia couldn't help but feel the growing distance between them. The turning point came when Eleanor was nominated for a prestigious award in recognition of her contributions to the local business community. It wasn't just for the success of the cafe, it was for her leadership, her mentorship, and her ability to inspire those around her. Eleanor had become a symbol of what could be accomplished when you stayed true to yourself and adapted with grace to an ever-changing world. When the invitation arrived for the award ceremony, Olivia knew she had to attend, though her heart wasn't entirely in it. She had spent so much of her life watching Eleanor from a distance, quietly competing, trying to measure up. But now, in the shadow of her grandmother's growing acclaim, she was feeling smaller by the day. Eleanor was everything Olivia wished she could be, but never seemed able to fully embody. The evening of the ceremony arrived, and Olivia dressed carefully, though nothing she wore could distract from the nagging sense of inadequacy she felt. As they arrived at the venue, she took in the crowd, the successful business people, the influencers, the movers and shakers of the local community. They all gathered in the gleaming hall, buzzing with excitement. And there, standing amidst it all, was Eleanor, poised, calm, the center of attention without ever needing to command it. Olivia took her seat, as far back as possible, attempting to remain invisible, but she couldn't avoid the truth that pressed on her chest. Her grandmother had always been a figure of influence, but now it was clear. Eleanor had surpassed the expectations of others, and she had done so with a quiet, undeniable strength. The ceremony began, and as the night progressed, it became clear that Eleanor was the star. When her name was called, the applause was deafening. Olivia watched as her grandmother walked up to the stage, the spotlight illuminating her with an almost ethereal quality. Eleanor's poise, her grace under the pressure, was enough to make the entire room stop and take notice. She wasn't just a successful businesswoman, she was a symbol of perseverance, of dignity in a world that valued fleeting success. As Eleanor took the stage to accept her award, Olivia felt a sense of something shifting inside her. This was no longer just about the cafe, it was about the quiet power Eleanor had built over her entire life. As her grandmother spoke, Olivia felt the words resonate deep within her own heart. Success, Eleanor said, her voice steady and clear, is not defined by how loud we are or how many people notice us. True strength is found in our ability to remain grounded, to continue moving forward when it seems the world has forgotten us. It's about persistence, humility, and knowing that every step, no matter how small, leads us closer to who we're meant to be. The room fell silent, captivated by Eleanor's words. Olivia, still seated in the back, felt the weight of the moment settle over her. This wasn't just a speech. It was a declaration of everything Eleanor had lived by. It was a blueprint for a life built on respect, on quiet resilience, and on the kind of success that didn't need external validation to be meaningful. When the applause finally died down, Eleanor looked around the room with a quiet smile. She wasn't gloating. There was no triumph in her gaze, no sense of victory, just the deep satisfaction of knowing she had earned this moment through years of hard work and unwavering integrity. As Eleanor returned to her seat, Olivia stood, her heart beating a little faster. She was torn, caught between the admiration she felt for her grandmother's strength and the deep insecurity gnawing at her insides. She had spent her whole life seeking approval, striving for a place at the table, but tonight, she realized the truth. The people who mattered, the ones who had truly built something lasting, were the ones who didn't need to seek attention. They simply were. Olivia knew, as she watched Eleanor, that the space between them had grown wider than ever. She wasn't sure she could ever close that gap, not in the way she had once hoped, but there was something else now, something new. A quiet understanding that perhaps the greatest strength Eleanor had shown wasn't in the success of the cafe, or in the recognition she received, but in the wisdom she carried, the way she had remained true to herself while so many others rushed to be seen. Olivia sat down, feeling a flicker of something she couldn't yet define, and for the first time she wondered if perhaps, someday, she might learn to be, rather than just try to fit in. It was a quiet afternoon when Olivia found herself standing outside the cafe, watching the hustle of customers pass by. The familiar hum of activity now felt different. Everything had shifted in subtle but undeniable ways. The cafe, the place that had once been a backdrop to her youthful pursuits, was no longer just a setting. It had become a symbol of transformation, of respect, of Eleanor's quiet dominance, and Olivia had finally come to terms with it. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of self-reflection. Eleanor's success, her poise, her ability to turn every moment into a testament to quiet power. It had all left an indelible mark on Olivia. She had spent so much time chasing approval, trying to fit into a world that valued appearances and superficial recognition. But now, she understood. The true meaning of class, the one Eleanor had been showing her all along, was something deeper. It couldn't be bought or imitated. It was about how you treated others, how you remained grounded, and how you carried yourself through the world with integrity. That was the class Eleanor had taught her. That was the legacy she was building. As Olivia stood there, she felt a rising need to make things right. It wasn't just about apologizing for what she had done to Eleanor. It was about owning her mistakes and learning from them. She had wronged her grandmother, not just by dismissing her, but by undervaluing what she represented. Now, she was ready to admit it. She pushed open the cafe door, the familiar bell above it ringing softly as she entered. The space was vibrant, as it always was, but there was something else in the air today. Eleanor wasn't just part of this place anymore. She was the heart of it. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she spotted her grandmother near the back, speaking with one of the staff. Eleanor looked up and smiled as Olivia approached, the warmth in her eyes still there, but with a hint of something deeper. She had seen this change in Olivia before, heard it in her voice during their conversations, seen it in the way Olivia had begun to watch her more closely. But today, it was different. "Grandma," Olivia began, her voice unsteady, but she couldn't keep the tremor from it. I I need to say something." Eleanor's expression softened. She set down the cup she had been holding and motioned for Olivia to sit across from her. "Of course, darling. What's on your mind?" Olivia hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to start. The words had been building inside her for weeks now, and yet saying them out loud felt like the hardest thing she had ever done. "I was wrong," Olivia finally said, her voice quiet but resolute. "The way I treated you, I wasn't just dismissive. I was hurtful. And I'm sorry." Eleanor listened without interrupting, her gaze steady but not harsh. It was the same calm strength Olivia had come to admire, the same grace that had always been there, even when Olivia didn't recognize it. "I was so focused on fitting in," Olivia continued, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I didn't see what you were really doing. I thought you were just stuck in the past, trying to be something you weren't. But now I see that I was wrong. I was the one who didn't understand." Eleanor's gaze softened further. She didn't offer an immediate response, but Olivia could feel the weight of the silence, the unspoken understanding between them. After a long moment, Eleanor finally spoke. "You don't need to apologize for trying to find your place, Olivia. But what I've learned, and what I've tried to show you, is that class, dignity, respect, they're not about how you look, or how many people know your name. They're about how you carry yourself, how you make others feel, and whether you're willing to put in the work when no one's watching." Olivia nodded, the weight of her grandmother's words settling in. She had always admired Eleanor's strength, but now she understood it differently. It wasn't about appearances or being recognized. It was about the quiet persistence to stay true to yourself, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. "Grandma, I see it now," Olivia said, her voice breaking with sincerity. "Class isn't about being seen. It's about how you make others feel, and how you stay true to yourself no matter what's happening around you." Eleanor reached across the table, placing her hand on Olivia's, the gesture simple but powerful. "Exactly. You've learned more than you think, darling. And I'm proud of you for recognizing it." Olivia felt a sense of relief wash over her, as if a weight she didn't even realize she was carrying had been lifted. But there was more she wanted to say. "I want to be better," she admitted, looking directly at Eleanor. "I want to build meaningful relationships. I want to be the kind of person people look up to, like you. But I don't know where to start." Eleanor's smile was gentle. "Start by being authentic. Build relationships based on who you are, not who you think you should be. True connections are built on honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to grow. It's not about having the right answers. It's about showing up, being present, and offering support when it's needed." Olivia absorbed the words, feeling the shift inside her. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't even close. But she was finally starting to understand what truly mattered. As Eleanor spoke, Olivia found herself thinking about the café, about the sense of community it had cultivated under her grandmother's leadership. "Can I help?" she asked, her voice tentative. "Can I be involved in the next big event here? I want to contribute, to show you that I'm serious about learning." Eleanor's eyes twinkled with approval. "I'd be honored to have you help, Olivia. We can start by working together on the upcoming event. It's time for you to bring your own ideas to the table." Olivia's heart swelled. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was trying to catch up to Eleanor. She felt like they were on the same path, walking side by side. And for the first time in a long time, Olivia was at peace with where she was and where she was going. As she left the cafe that day, the future didn't seem so daunting. She was no longer trying to prove herself or fit into a world that wasn't hers. Instead, she was building her own legacy, one rooted in authenticity, connection, and the strength of the lessons her grandmother had taught her. Eleanor's invitation to Olivia felt like a turning point, a moment that signified a shift in their relationship, one that had been a long time coming. The evening would be a private dinner at the cafe, a gathering of influential figures from the community, a group of people who had come to respect Eleanor for the impact she had made not only in the cafe business, but in their lives as well. It wasn't just about the food or the wine, it was about connections, about relationships that went deeper than surface-level interactions. Olivia wasn't sure she belonged there, but she knew she needed to be. There was a sense of nervousness that had settled in her chest as soon as the invitation arrived. But it was different now. Something inside her had changed. Eleanor had asked her to join, not because she was a part of the world these people inhabited, but because Eleanor wanted her to see it, experience it, understand it. It wasn't about fitting in or playing a part. It was about learning from those who had built something lasting, something real. As she walked into the cafe that evening, Olivia took a deep breath. The space felt different in the evening light, more intimate. The soft golden glow of the chandeliers casting long shadows on the polished wood floors. The familiar hum of conversation and the clink of glassware filled the air. But there was an undercurrent of something more: respect, anticipation, and the subtle hum of power in the room. Eleanor stood at the front of the room, greeting each guest with the kind of warm, assured presence that had come to define her. The room seemed to quiet the moment she spoke, as if everyone there knew that her words mattered, that her insights had weight. Olivia watched from the doorway, feeling the weight of Eleanor's influence in the air, a quiet but palpable force that everyone respected. Eleanor's eyes met hers across the room, a small smile playing at her lips. She didn't need to say anything to make Olivia feel included. Her invitation alone had done that, showing that Olivia had a place at this table now, a place that had once seemed so out of reach. "Olivia," Eleanor said, her voice warm but with a subtle edge of command. "I'm so glad you could join us tonight. Come, let me introduce you to a few people." Olivia hesitated for just a moment, the nerves creeping back, but Eleanor's steady presence beside her steadied her. They moved through the room, and Olivia couldn't help but notice the way people gravitated toward Eleanor. She was a magnet, drawing others in with her calm authority and genuine interest in their lives. She wasn't just a figurehead, she was a part of this world, and she belonged here. As they approached a small group of people, Eleanor made introductions. The conversations were rich and deep. Business ventures, local philanthropy, the latest developments in the community. Olivia felt like an outsider at first, unsure of how to participate in these discussions, unsure of how to fit into this world that had always seemed so distant from her own. But then Eleanor, ever the subtle guide, began to include her in the conversation. She asked Olivia what she thought about a certain initiative, about a project that had been discussed at one of the earlier events at the cafe. It was an easy question, one that invited Olivia to speak, to share her thoughts. And Olivia did, tentatively at first. But as she spoke, she realized that her ideas mattered. She wasn't just there as a guest, she was part of the conversation. The evening wore on, and Olivia began to see how much her grandmother had built. Not just in the cafe, but in the lives of those around her. These people didn't just admire Eleanor, they respected her. They valued her wisdom, her ability to bring people together, her knack for finding solutions in the most unlikely places. It wasn't about being flashy or glamorous. It was about substance, about integrity. As the dinner progressed, Eleanor subtly guided Olivia, not just in how to participate in the conversation, but in how to be present, how to make meaningful connections. There was no rush, no urgency in the way Eleanor interacted with everyone. She took the time to listen, to ask questions that invited others to share their experiences, to build trust. And Olivia began to realize something that had eluded her before. True influence wasn't about being loud or being seen at all the right places. It wasn't about seeking attention or approval. It was about staying grounded, offering value to others, and letting the connections form naturally. Eleanor had built her influence over time with patience, consistency, and a deep respect for the people around her. It wasn't something that could be faked or forced. It had to come from within. By the end of the evening, Olivia found herself seated at the table with the others, no longer an outsider. She was a part of the conversation, a part of the group. The once intimidating world of influence and success no longer felt so distant. It was a world she had a place in, a world she could now understand, thanks to Eleanor's quiet, yet unwavering guidance. Eleanor had built something lasting at the cafe, something that went beyond just food and drink. It was about community, about creating a space where people felt valued and seen. And now, Olivia saw the impact of that work. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about the deep, lasting impact Eleanor had made, not just on the cafe, but on the lives of those who had come into contact with her. Olivia wasn't just a guest at this table. She was learning how to build her own place at it. As the evening ended and the guests began to filter out, Olivia felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. She wasn't chasing approval or validation anymore. She had a place at the table now, not just because of who she was, but because of who she was becoming. And as Eleanor stood by her side, offering her a quiet smile, Olivia knew she had learned the most important lesson of all. True success wasn't about being noticed. It was about the connections you made, the impact you left, and the integrity you maintained, no matter the world around you. Olivia had finally taken her seat at the table, not just as a guest, but as someone worthy of being there. The cafe was more than just a business now. It was a local institution, a beacon of transformation that stretched far beyond the walls of its trendy interior. Eleanor's quiet dominance had cultivated an environment where people felt not only welcomed, but inspired. It had become a place where young entrepreneurs gathered for guidance, where local charities found a platform to grow, and where the community came together to celebrate shared values. Eleanor stood at the center of it all, always moving forward, always evolving. She was no longer just a successful businesswoman. She was a community leader, a mentor, a guide. As she sat in her usual spot, observing the ebb and flow of activity, she reflected on everything that had changed, everything she had built. The quiet strength that had first led her to the cafe had now become a symbol of resilience, of the kind of success that went beyond fleeting moments of recognition. It was the kind of legacy that lasted. Today, Eleanor was hosting a grand event at the cafe. It wasn't just a celebration of the cafe's success. It was a celebration of everything that had led up to this point. The guests were a who's who of the local community. Business owners, influencers, nonprofit leaders, and philanthropists. The event was a testament to the impact Eleanor had made, not just in the cafe world, but in the community as a whole. It was a reminder of how a single person could change the lives of those around them. Olivia was by her side, her role shifting from a bystander to a participant in the legacy her grandmother had built. She had spent the last few months learning the ropes, gaining more responsibility in the cafe's operations. She wasn't just working for Eleanor now, she was learning from her, building her own sense of leadership. Eleanor had become her mentor in the truest sense of the word, guiding her not just in business, but in life. As Olivia helped greet guests and offered them drinks, she couldn't help but feel the weight of what her grandmother had created. This wasn't just a cafe. It was a living, breathing testament to perseverance, integrity, and authenticity. Eleanor hadn't just built a business. She had built a community, a family, one that transcended anything Olivia had ever known. It wasn't lost on Olivia that the cafe was now a symbol of what could be achieved with vision, hard work, and genuine relationships. Eleanor's approach to business had never been about vanity or pride. It had always been about serving others, about creating something meaningful that would last. And now, Olivia was beginning to see that for herself. As the night wore on and guests exchanged stories, laughter, and business advice, Eleanor subtly guided Olivia, teaching her how to navigate the complexities of leadership with grace. She spoke not just about numbers or strategy, but about the importance of connection, of making people feel seen and heard. She had always known that true influence wasn't about forcing your way into the spotlight. It was about making your presence felt in the way you treated others, the way you listened, and the way you gave. Olivia was still learning, but she was no longer afraid of the future. She had stopped chasing approval from others and was now focused on building something for herself, a legacy that would stand the test of time. Eleanor had taught her that real success came from staying true to who you were, not from what others thought of you. It was about impact. It was about building something that would help others grow long after you were gone. As the evening came to a close, the cafe buzzed with a quiet energy, the kind of energy that came from knowing you were a part of something far bigger than yourself. The guests began to leave, but Olivia remained by her grandmother's side, watching as people stopped to thank her, to ask for advice, to offer their own words of admiration. The media had begun covering Eleanor's transformation from a quiet investor into a community leader. The story was spreading. The woman who had once been underestimated, the woman who had been told she didn't belong at certain tables, was now not just a part of the conversation. She was the conversation. The cafe's success had mirrored Eleanor's own journey, one of quiet resilience, of knowing your worth and never compromising on your values. As they stood at the front of the cafe, Eleanor's hand on Olivia's shoulder, the weight of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. Eleanor had shown Olivia that true class wasn't about appearances or status. It was about the legacy you left behind, the connections you built, and the respect you earned through your actions, not your words. For the first time, Olivia felt like she was standing in her grandmother's shoes, not as an admirer, but as a part of the legacy she had built. The table that had once been reserved for a select few now felt like a space she belonged in. She wasn't just a guest at the table anymore. She was a contributor. And one day, when the time came, she would pass the lessons she had learned on to others. Eleanor's gaze softened, a smile of quiet satisfaction playing on her lips as she looked around the room. She thought I wasn't classy enough to sit with her table. So I showed up, owning the cafe they chose, and built a legacy she could never ignore. As the final guests filtered out and the evening drew to a close, Olivia felt the weight of her grandmother's words settle into her bones. The path ahead was hers to walk now, and she was ready for it. She had finally taken her place at the table, not just as a granddaughter, but as a woman who had learned to build something real. And Eleanor's legacy was now, more than ever, hers to carry.